Dear students, all are well, right? Okay, so this is the sixth video of this series, and in this video we are going to discuss block number 3 and 4. That's the last two books of BCOE 108 PYQs and answers. In the channel we already posted PYQs of block number 1 and 2. Those who didn't visit the channel, please visit it. Okay, I hope it will be helpful for you. So if you like the content, please like, share and subscribe. Okay, without further ado, we'll get into the video. Okay, so the first question is, what's the difference between share transfer and share transmission? Okay, so on the basis of meaning, transfer of shares means the transfer of title to shares voluntarily by one party to another. Okay, you are transferring your share title to other person, so that is transfer. Transmission of shares means the transfer of the title to the shares by the operation of law. Okay, transmission means that is by the intervention of law that transfer is happening. So that is difference between transfer and transmission. Voluntarily you are transferring your share to another person, so that is transfer, and with the intervention of law you are transferring your share to the share is getting transferred to other person. It is transmission of shares. Then who is getting affected by the transfer of shares? Deliberate act of the parties. And transmission of shares is by insolvency, death, inheritance or lunacy of the members. If insolvency of a member happened, death of a member happened, in lunacy or mental instability happen, so the transmission of shares will occur. Then who has to initiate the transfer of shares? Transferor and the transferee. But in the case of transmission, legal heir or the receiver. The consideration, so while transfer of shares happen, adequate consideration must be there. So you are taking a share from one person, so you have to give him consideration. But in the case of transmission, no consideration, because as per law or by the intervention of law it is getting transferred. The transferor is not giving the share voluntarily. Okay, then execution of valid transfer deed, yes, but transmission, no. Liabilities of the transferor ceases on the completion of transfer, but in the transmission original liability of the share continues to exist. If you have some unpaid share amount, then you have to you are transmitting your share to the other person, but the liability will exist there. But in the case of transfer of shares, liability will also get transferred to the transferee. Okay, stamp duty, the payable on the market value of the shares, but there is no need of paying the stamp duty in the case of transmission of shares. So these are the important differences between transfer of shares and transmission of shares. Next important question is, explain the procedure of forfeiting the shares and also the state of forfeiture. So what do you mean by forfeiture of shares? It means the cancellation of the shares for non-payment of calls due. Okay, so the company can forfeit the shares only if the article of association of the company allow forfeiture. So the cancellation of the shares, if the person who is a subscriber has some unpaid payment is there, so pending payment is there and he is not ready to pay that, then the company has the right to cancel the share. So that is possible only if that cancellation or the forfeiture of share is mentioned in the article. Okay, then if any shareholder is not able to pay the amount of call, company may exercise the power to forfeit his shares on which he is unable to pay the amount of call. A company can forfeit shares on non-payment of number of calls. The company may, before forfeiture, must first give a prior notice, 14 days prior notice to the defaulting shareholder, so that if he is able to pay the amount within 14 days, then everything will back to normal. If he fail to do so, the company can go ahead with the forfeiture or the cancellation of the shares. If not paid by the specified date, the company can go ahead with the forfeiture of shares. So in short, we have to learn that forfeiture means the cancellation of the shares due to the non-payment of calls due, right? Next, what are the effect of forfeiture? So the first effect is cessation of membership. So the cancellation of share means you are no longer the member. Second one, cessation of liability. Liability of a person whose share has been forfeited comes to an end. When the company receives the payment in full of all such money in respect of shares forfeited. So, however, notwithstanding the forfeiture of shares, shareholder remains liable to pay to the company all the money with at the date of forfeiture were payable by him to the company in respect of forfeited shares. Thus, the liability of unpaid calls remain even after the forfeiture of shares. So, for example, A has taken a share of a company for amount 10,000 rupees, okay, but he paid only 1,000 rupees. Remaining 9,000 rupees he has to pay, but he is not in a financial position to pay the amount. The company intimated him regarding this forfeiture threat and all, but he fails to pay the amount within the notice period. So the company go ahead with the forfeiting procedure. Okay, so now he is no longer the shareholder of the company, but his liability is still there. He has to pay the remaining 9,000 rupees to the company. Okay. Next, liability as a past member. Liability of a former shareholder remains as the liability of a past member to pay calls if liquidation of the company takes place within a year of the forfeiture. Next is forfeited share becomes company's property. So once the cancellation of the share happen, that share is the company's property. Company can sell it to other person. Next, so that is coming under forfeiture of shares. So forfeiture of shares is clear, right? So forfeiture of the shares means cancellation of the shares. So once forfeiture happen, that is the liability of the past liability will remain. Then that forfeited share will be the company's asset. Now the next is surrender of shares is the same thing as forfeiture of shares. Okay, surrender of shares is considered as the shortcut to forfeiture. Surrender of shares means voluntarily return of shares by a member to the company. It's a shortcut to the long procedure of forfeiture of shares. Like I told, a person has taken a share of a company for rupees 10,000, but he is not able to pay the amount, and he is now ready to surrender the share with the company. So he is not supposed to go ahead with this forfeiture procedure, right? So shares which are liable to be forfeited on the account of default in the payment of call may be surrendered by the holder if he so desire. Such voluntary surrender of the shares can be accepted by the company provided it is authorized by the article. So for all these things, for the forfeiture of the shares as well as the surrender of shares, these should be there in the clearly as per the norms mentioned in the article of association. Okay, so the formalities with regard to the forfeiture are then unnecessary, and shares are deemed to be forfeited and cancelled without detailed procedure. Okay, so that is the difference between. Okay, so now we are going to discuss the next question. State the difference between the member and shareholder, and can a minor be a member of a company? Okay, so first we are going to discuss the difference between member and a shareholder on the basis of 4 criteria. On the basis of meaning, a person whose name is entered in the register of the members of the company, so that person is known as the member of the company. A person who owns a share of a company is known as a shareholder of the company. Second one, it is defined in section 255 of Company Act, the member, but it is not defined in the Company Act, shareholder, right? The person who holds the share warrant is known as the shareholder. The holder of a share is not a member. So every company must have a minimum number of members. We know that for a private company it is 2, for a public company it is 7. So in the case of a shareholder, the company limited by shares can have shareholders. So the person who signs a memorandum of association with the company become a member, and after signing the memorandum the person can be a shareholder only when the shares are allotted to him. So these are the basic difference between member and shareholder. Okay, next we are going to discuss a minor can be a member. So a minor is not a competent person to enter into a valid contract. As such, he is disqualified to acquire membership. So we discussed, hope all of you may remember, that is in mercantile law we discussed about what are the elements of a valid contract, right? So under there we discussed about the capacity of parties who are eligible to get into a contract. There one of the important point is minor. A minor cannot enter into a legally valid contract. Okay, so here the minor is so if you are making a contract with a minor, so that type of contract is coming under void contract, right? So minor is a person who is not competent one to enter into a valid contract, and he is disqualified to acquire membership. However, minors may be allotted share. He can be allotted with shares. On attaining majority, minor can avoid the contract, but minor should repudiate the contract within a reasonable time. If the shares are transferred to a minor, transferor will continue to remain liable for all the future calls on such shares, even if he was ignorant of the minority of the transferee. So if A is the transferor, okay, and he transfer the share to the share to B. B is a minor, okay. A is not aware of the fact that B is a minor, but he transfer the shares. But then also he is unaware of the fact that B is a minor. Then also A is liable for the future calls liability, right? If the company is aware of the minority of the transferee at the time of transfer, it can refuse to register the transfer in favor of a minor unless the shares are fully paid. Okay, so the company is aware of the minority. So company has a knowledge that the transferee is a minor. Okay, so it can refuse to register the transfer in favor of minor unless the shares are fully paid. Okay, so these are the things coming under the capability of minor or the competency of minor. Is a minor to be a member of a company, right? Now the next question is, define a director. Who can become a director of a company, and what is the minimum number of directors in a public and private company? So director is a person who is appointed to perform the duties and functions of a director of a company in accordance with the Company Act of 2013, and the person who is in charge of the management of the affairs of the company is known as the director, and they are collectively known as board of directors. Okay, so the directors are the brain of the company. So the directors are those people who are taking care of the internal affairs of the company, or they are managing the affairs of the company, and they are together known as board of directors. Okay, they are known as the brain of the company. Okay, next question is, who can be appointed as a director? So a managing director must be an individual, that is he or she should be a real person, and the maximum period is 5 years for the appointment. And managing director of a pre-existing company can be a managing director of another company if the former company have no disapproval regarding the appointment, right? So next point is, for the appointment as a director or a director, the director identification number or DIN is required. That is, when a director is appointed, intimation in the form of DIR 12 to the register of companies must be given within 13 days of appointment. So director identification number or DIN number is required, and no individual who has already been allotted a DIN can apply for, obtain or possess another DIN. Okay, so if you have one DIN, you cannot apply for more, right? So like PAN card number, right? So if a person apply for more than one DIN, he may be punished with an imprisonment for a term that can extend to 6 months, or with a fine that may extend up to 50,000 rupees. So in short, you have to learn a managing director is a person who should be a real person, and appointment tenure is 5 years. And if he is working as a director of a company, he can work as a director of another company too if the former has no disapproval regarding his appointment. Then DIN should be there, that is director identification number. It is allotted only once for a person, and if he is applying for more than one DN, it's a punishable offense. Okay, and imprisonment also there, and penalty also he has to pay. Okay, then minimum and maximum number of directors in a company. So as per the section 149 of Company Act of 2013, every company shall have a minimum number of 3 directors in the case of a public company and 2 in the case of a private company. For a private company it is 2, and for a public company it is 3, and for a one-person company it should be 1. Okay, so the company can appoint maximum 15 directors, and the company may appoint more than 15 directors passing a special resolution in general meeting, and approval of central government is also not required. Okay, a period of 1 year has been provided to enable the companies to comply with this requirement, right? So the directors minimum is 2 for a private, 1 for a one-person company, 3 for a public company, and the maximum is 15. Okay, so if a company needs to appoint more than 15 directors, it has to pass a special resolution general meeting. There is no need of central government approval, right? Next, discuss the legal position of directors. So, the position of directors are sometimes described as trustees, agents, and sometimes as managing partners. So, first we are going to discuss directors as employees. So, they are the professional men of the company. They are hired to direct the affairs of the company. So, they are the officers of the company and they are not the servants, right? They are the controller of the affairs of the company. So, next is they are the agents of the company in the eyes of law. So, that's why when we discuss these prospectus misstatement in the prospectus, the concerned director is in the default stage, so he has to pay the penalty or he has to bear the punishment, right? So he is acting as an agent as per the company, as per the legal ground. So directors as trustees, they are also considered as the trustees, and then they are managing partners. They are interested with the management and control of the company affairs, and they are also the shareholders of the company. They manage the firm for the personal benefit along with the general benefit of the company. So the personal development along with the overall development of the company is happening while they are serving as the director of a particular company, right? So these are the legal position of directors. Okay, so the next important question is explain the different kinds of meetings of a company. So explain the requisites of a valid meeting. Okay, so there are three kinds of meetings. Okay, we can broadly classify the meetings of a company into three kinds. So the first one is meeting of the shareholders, that is AGM, then EGM, and then class meeting. Then next is meeting of the board of directors and the committees, that is meeting of the BOD, meeting of the committee of directors, and last one is other meeting, that is a meeting of the debenture holder, meeting of the creditors, and contributors on the winding up of the company. Okay, so you know that annual general meeting, it's an important question. So what do you mean by annual general meeting? So the annual general meeting of a company must be held within first annual general meeting. So first AGM, within 9 months. Okay, within 9 months. Within 9 months from the date of closing of its financial year. Okay, so next important point coming under AGM is gap between two AGM. Not more than 15 months. Okay, so meeting at least one meeting should be held within a year, right? Okay, then next is extraordinary general meeting. So extraordinary general meeting may be called by the board of directors or the tribunal or by the board of directors on the requisition of the members. So that is extraordinary general meeting, right? Then class meetings. So the class meetings means the share capital, some shareholders have certain dissent, they are not agreeing with certain things and they want to explain the things, so they can call for a meeting. So that is coming under class meeting, right? Then meeting of the board of directors and their committees. So that is coming under meeting of the BOD, then meeting of the committees of the directors. Other meetings are meetings of debenture holder, meeting of creditors, and meeting of creditors and contributors on the winding up of the company. So that we discussed under winding up process. So these voluntary winding up, before the voluntary winding up, the members of the company has to come together and they have to pass a resolution, and the declaration of solvency should be there, that is at least two directors should declare a certificate that the company is in a sound financial position, and it is able to pay its debt, and it has enough resources or enough asset to pay the debts. Okay, so these all things we discussed earlier. Okay, so next important point is, what are the requisites of a valid meeting? So first is, it's a properly convened by proper authority. Okay, so meeting must be considered to be a validly held if it is properly convened by proper authority. Second one, proper notice must be served. Okay, so proper authority, that means it is called by the proper authority, means it should be convened by the board of directors. Okay, then second point is, proper notice must be served. Okay, that is, proper notice must be given to every member, that is legal representative of every deceased member too. Okay, then the notice must be either in written format or through prescribed electronic mode, and it should be given at least 21 clear days prior to the meeting. So at least 21 days prior to the meeting, then the proper notice should be served. Then proper quorum should be present in the meeting. So that also we discussed for a public company, for a private company. For a public company, if the number of persons present in the general meeting is between 1000 to which is within 1000, then how much should be the quorum? Then between 1000 to 3000 how much, and more than 5000 how much? All these things we discussed. These all details are given in the previous PPTs. Just go through it. Okay, then proper chairman must preside the meeting. Every general meeting of a company should be presided over by a chairman. Okay, so the article also provide a mode of appointment of the chairman of the meeting. Okay, then properly conducted, that is, the business must be validly transacted at the meeting. So as per the rules, the meeting should be conducted, and all the procedures should be in accordance with the guidelines mentioned in the article. Okay, then proper minutes of the meeting must be prepared. So a proper record of the proceedings should be kept in the minute book, and every company is required to maintain a minutes of the proceedings of every annual general meeting and meetings of the board of directors as well as the committees. Okay, so when minutes are confirmed and signed by the chairman, and they are acceptable in a court of law as an evidence for the proceedings, right? So these are the important requisites of a valid meeting. It should be properly convened, that means the proper authority should give the notice, and the notice should be served 21 days prior, and then the proper quorum must be there, and the chairman properly preside the meeting, and then business should be validly transacted, and the proper minute should be maintained, right? Next, independent directors. So section 149(6) of the Company Act provides that an independent director is a person who is other than a managing director or a whole-time director or a nominee director, and who is, in the opinion of the board, is a person of integrity and possesses relevant expertise and experience, who is or was not a promoter of the company or is holding its or a sub. So for example, X is a person who is an independent director of ABC company, means he has no personal relation with that XYZ company or its subsidiary company or its associate company or its holding company. Okay, and he is a person of integrity, and he has possessed relevant expertise and experience, right? Then who has no pecuniary relationship, that is, no relationship on the basis of money or transactions related to this company or the holding or its associate company. Okay, so these are the important qualifications for a person to be an independent director, right? So for every listed public company, at least 1/3 of the total number of directors are independent directors, and any fraction contained in that 1/3 shall be rounded off as 1. For an unlisted public company, central government may prescribe the minimum number of independent directors in case of any classes of public company. So for a listed public company, 1/3 of the total number of directors should be an independent directors. For an unlisted public company, the central government will provide the provision for the. Next important question is, what do you mean by resolution, and what are the different types of resolution? So resolution can be defined as an agreement or a decision that made by the directors or members of a company. So a proposed resolution is known as a motion, and when a resolution is passed, a company is bound by it, and there are mainly three types of resolution. First is ordinary resolution, second one is special resolution, and the last one is resolution requiring special notice. So first we are going to discuss what do you mean by ordinary resolution. If the notice required under this act has been duly given and is required to be passed by vote cast, whether on a show of hand or electronically or on a poll, so that is an ordinary resolution. Okay, so notice is already provided, and there is a requirement of vote cast either by show of hand or electronically or on a poll. That is an ordinary resolution. Special resolution means a resolution has been duly specified in notice calling the general meeting or other intimation given to the members of the resolution. Notice required under this act has been duly given. Okay, then that is, it should be given prior 21 days prior, and the votes cast in favor of resolution, whether on show of hand or electronically or the postal ballot, are required to be not less than 3 times the number of votes, right? And if any cast against the resolution by the members so entitled and voting. Resolution requiring special notice. A matter in respect of special notice is required. The resolution for the appointment of a person as an auditor at the annual general meeting other than the auditor, for providing expressly that returning auditor shall not be reappointed. For example, one auditor is getting retired, and a resolution has to be passed in such a way that the person who is stepping out of the company will not be reappointed as the auditor. Okay, so in that case the requiring special notice is required. Then another one, the resolution for removing a director before his period of expiry. Okay, so his expiry period will be, that is his period of tenure period will be ending by next year, but he's getting he is getting removed from the company. Okay, so for that type of activities or that type of decision making, resolution requiring special notice is inevitable. Okay, so in short, you have to learn there are three types of resolutions are there: ordinary and resolution requiring special notice. So resolution means it's an agreement or a decision made by the directors or the members of a company. So resolution is proposed, that means it is not as a motion. Okay, when it is passed by the company, so it is binding document, or a company has to follow the resolution. Okay, that's the end of this series. So through these 6 videos we finished the important PYQs and answers of BCOE 108. Okay, so I hope we covered almost all the important questions. So just go through these questions as well as the answers. It will be helpful for you while preparing for your examination. So study hard, do your best, and the universe will provide you the rest. Okay, so if you like the content, as usual, like, share and subscribe. So study hard, do your best. Okay, then stay healthy. So we will meet again with another video of monetary theory within 1 or 2 days. Till then, it's bye. Take care all of you. All the best one for your exam. Do well.